Welcome to Part 2, Sources of Organic Nutrients, of our Soils Module series.
This module was authored by Adria Fernandez, John Lamb, Christine Moncada, Constance Carlson, and Craig Schaefer of the University of Minnesota in 2017 and was updated in 2026. Narrated by Constance Carlson, with additional narration generated using the AI voice of Hannah from ElevenLabs.
In this second Soils module, we will cover sources of organic nutrients, including legumes and green manures, animal manures, compost, processed fertilizers, and micronutrients and other amendments.
On this slide are alfalfa plants, a forage legume, and green manure crop that is common in organic systems.
Soil nutrients can be derived from a variety of sources in organic systems. These include plant sources such as legumes and green manures. Legumes are plants that fix or capture nitrogen from the atmosphere by hosting nitrogen-fixing rhizobium bacteria in nodules on their roots. Seed of these crops should be treated with a rhizobium inoculant to ensure that they will nodulate and fix nitrogen. Your rotation may include legumes as both green manures, also called plow-down crops, and as grain or forage crops that will be harvested.
In this photo, we show a field of alfalfa being cut for its forage.
Grain legumes include soybean, pea, and dry bean. With any legume that is harvested, some nitrogen will be exported from the farm. However, some grain and forage crops, including pea and alfalfa, may still leave a net positive contribution to soil N after harvest. Cover or green manure crops, like vetch or clover, will return their fixed N to the soil when the biomass is incorporated. Cover and forage legumes include vetch, clover, alfalfa, and native prairie legumes. High biomass producers, like vetch and alfalfa, will provide more plow-down N. You can check whether your legume crop is effectively fixing nitrogen. Dig up a plant that is over 1 month old but not yet flowering. Remove the soil from the roots and look for nodules, which will be round or elongate whitish growths on the roots. You can split open the nodules with a fingernail.
This picture shows the taproot of red clover, which has elongated nodules.
Actively fixing nodules will have a pink or red color inside. Many factors affect how much nitrogen a legume crop will contribute to the following crop. The first is simply how much biomass it produces, which in turn depends on the legume species used, as well as the density, height, and weediness of the stand, and the stand age, or how long the legume has been in place. The more biomass a legume stand produces, and the longer it is in place, the more N it will provide. How much N the legume biomass contains and how readily it will decompose is affected by its composition, particularly the carbon-nitrogen ratio, or the amount of carbon relative to the amount of nitrogen. Crop material that is more mature will have a higher CN ratio, so it will tend to contain somewhat less nitrogen in a given amount of biomass, and will decompose more slowly. Your management decisions can affect how much nitrogen a legume crop will contribute.
This includes the number of cuttings and the timing of the cuttings.
Harvesting legume biomass, for example cutting alfalfa for hay, will remove some of the nitrogen that has been fixed, but may also stimulate herbage regrowth and nitrogen release from roots. How and when the biomass is incorporated will also affect how quickly it will break down.
This picture shows alfalfa being baled to be transported from the field.
While aggressive tillage can accelerate the rate of organic matter decomposition, some factors affecting biomass decomposition and nitrogen release are not controlled by your management decisions. The rate of nitrogen release and loss will depend on soil temperatures, moisture, and biological activity. Biomass will decompose more readily in warmer temperatures and when moisture is adequate. But warm, wet conditions can also lead to denitrification, or the loss of N to the atmosphere. Because biomass decomposition depends on soil and weather conditions, the timing of nutrient availability will vary and may not fully align with the timing of crop nitrogen need. It is common for nitrogen release from livestock and green manures to peak early in the season, while a crop, for example corn, may have its period of peak growth and peak N demand in July.
Here is a generalized graph of the nitrogen needs of a crop over the months of the growing season from March to September. The need gradually increases from April to June, peaks at the end of July, and starts to rapidly decrease into September.
Alternatively, in a cool spring, organic materials may be slow to decompose, leaving nitrogen supplies inaccessible until after crop demand has peaked. However, even when nutrient release is not perfectly synchronized with crop demand, the incorporation of green manures can feed the soil, contributing to organic matter stocks and long-term fertility. The reduction in fertilizer nitrogen needed by a crop following a legume is called an N credit.
This table shows different legume crops and the nitrogen credit in pounds per acre provided to first-year corn on medium textured soils. A 1-year-old stand of alfalfa provides 75 pounds of nitrogen per acre. A 2-year-old stand of alfalfa provides 150 pounds of nitrogen per acre. Red clover or Alsike clover provides 75 pounds of nitrogen per acre. A grass and legume hay mix provides 75 pounds of nitrogen per acre. Field peas or dry beans provide 20 pounds of nitrogen per acre. The source for this data is Kaiser et al., 2016.
The N credits shown here represent how much less fertilizer N will be needed for a corn crop when that corn crop follows a legume compared to when it follows corn. These recommendations have been developed for conventional systems and do not account for variation due to soil texture, organic matter, or cropping system, but you may find them useful as a rough guide. A stand of alfalfa that is at least 2 years old will generally provide 100% of the nitrogen needs of the following corn crop. Non-legume green manures can also play a role in building soil fertility. Although they do not fix nitrogen, they can take up nitrogen and other nutrients that would be vulnerable to loss and hold them in your system in their biomass. Sometimes this process is called nitrogen scavenging. Incorporating the biomass on non-legume green manures will contribute to soil organic matter and microbial activity. However, it's worth noting that when cover crops with a high C-N ratio are incorporated, available nitrogen can sometimes become temporarily unavailable because of immobilization, which happens when soil microbes take up and hold the nitrogen as they feed on the carbon in the plant material.
This photo shows a close-up of densely planted buckwheat seedlings. Buckwheat is a common non-legume green manure crop.
Generally, grasses or any other materials with a C-N ratio over about 24:1, meaning 24 times as much carbon as nitrogen, are likely to result in some immobilization. This table shows some examples of the carbon to nitrogen ratios of various materials.
The ideal carbon to nitrogen ratio is 24:1. Oat straw has a carbon to nitrogen ratio of 70:1. A rye cover crop terminated at anthesis has a ratio of 37:1. Pea straw has a ratio of 29:1. Mature alfalfa has a ratio of 25:1. Young alfalfa hay has a ratio of 13:1. A hairy vetch cover crop has a ratio of 11:1.
Another source of organic fertility is animal manures. Raw animal manures are allowed in organic farming and may be in solid or liquid forms from hogs, dairy or beef cattle, poultry, or other livestock. The manures can be obtained from conventional livestock operations and do not have to be sourced from organic livestock. However, you must ensure that any conventional manure you use does not contain prohibited materials. Your certifier should be notified of the source of your manures, and they may specify additional testing on conventional manure to confirm they are not contaminated. The organic standards restrict when raw animal manures can be applied. Manure cannot be applied to frozen ground, where it will be vulnerable to runoff, and application times are restricted to protect food safety. Manure can be applied to livestock feed crops at any time. However, for food crops, application must be at least 90 days before harvest in crops whose edible portions are not in contact with the soil. For example, corn. For crops whose edible portion is in contact with the soil, for example, carrots, manure application must be at least 120 days before harvest. Animal manures vary widely in their nutrient content and may vary even among similar sources, so it's important to have your own manure supplies tested. However, in general, hog and poultry manure tend to be quite high in nitrogen and phosphorus, while solid cattle manures tend to be somewhat less concentrated nutrient sources. Once you know the nutrient content of your manure source, you can calculate the application rate needed to provide the recommended amount of available N and P. Start by using crop-specific recommendations to establish the nutrient levels needed, and subtract appropriate credits for legumes or previous manure applications. Have your manure tested to determine its nutrient content, and calculate the amount of these nutrients that will be available to the crop in the first year after application. Calculate the rate of application that will provide the required amount of available nutrients. These steps also apply to determining application rates for compost or commercial fertilizers. Not all the nutrients initially present in manure will be available in the first year of application. Some will remain in the soil and be potentially available to your crops 2 and even 3 years or more after application. The amount of nutrients available post-application from manure will vary due to initial nutrient content, application method, and timing of application. This table demonstrates general trends in the percentage of nitrogen available over 3 years' time.
The table shows the percent nitrogen available over time by manure type in a sweep application. Beef cattle manure has 60% nitrogen available in year 1, 25% in year 2, and 10% in year 3. Dairy cattle manure has 55% nitrogen available in year 1, 25% in year 2, and 15% in year 3. Swine manure has 80% nitrogen available in year 1, 15% in year 2, and 0% in year 3.
Although manures from non-organic sources are permitted, many farmers have concerns about contaminants that may be in them, including heavy metals, antibiotics, pesticides, or trash from livestock facilities. Weed seed can also be a contaminant and may be killed by composting. Some certifiers may require testing to ensure that the levels of heavy metal contaminants are below a certain threshold. When applying, it's important not to over-fertilize, so be careful with flow control to ensure that you apply manure uniformly and at your target rate. Injection application methods, such as with a sweep or knife, that immediately incorporate manure are recommended over broadcast application.
In this picture, we show manure in the air as it is being spread over a field by broadcasting.
Compost is an excellent source of organic matter. Compost can be made from various base materials, including manure, bedding, and plant materials. Composting methods include windrows that are regularly turned,
static or undisturbed piles, or enclosed in-vessel systems. When you are composting animal manure, you must follow organic guidelines for making compost.
This image shows a pile of compost that is about 6 feet tall near a field.
The organic guidelines for compost are designed to ensure that any pathogens in the manure are killed. You must start your compost with a material or mixture of materials whose overall CN ratio is between 40:1 and 25:1. For contained systems or static aerated piles, the temperature of the pile must remain between 131 and 170 degrees Fahrenheit for at least 3 days. For windrow systems, the temperature must remain between 131 and 170 degrees for 15 days, and the windrow must be turned 5 times in that period.
In this image, we see large equipment in the process of turning a compost pile.
If compost has been made according to the guidelines, there are no organic restrictions on when you can apply it, although state pollution laws will still apply. It is recommended to incorporate the compost to allow soil microbes to break down the compost and release its nutrients. If you have composted manure in a way that doesn't meet the guidelines, you will need to follow the application restrictions for raw manure.
In this image, we see large equipment in the process of turning rows of compost.
Compost will generally have lower nutrient content and availability than raw manure, and in particular, it can be difficult to meet crop N needs with compost without exceeding P and K needs. It's best not to make compost your only N source in the long term, because this can lead to accumulation of phosphorus, salt, and other ions. Like with manure, it's a good idea to have your source tested for nutrient content. You should assume that 30% or less of the total N content measured in your compost will be available in the first year. The exact amount will depend on the base material and the composting method used.
On this slide, we show a close-up of composted turkey manure. You can see different-sized clumps of organic matter.
Various processed fertilizer products are available to organic farmers. Commercial fertilizers on the market include fish products, heat-treated manure products, sodium nitrate, also called Chilean nitrate, and bagged and blended formulations that may contain feather or blood meal, fish or aquatic plant extracts, or humic acids. Fertilizers are generally described using 3 numbers, 8, 2, 4 in this example, which represent the percent of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium in the fertilizer by weight. The label on any commercial fertilizer should show a guaranteed analysis which lists the amount of nitrogen, potassium, and any other nutrient present as a percent of the total weight of the fertilizer, and the chemical forms that they are found in. The label should also show the percentage of slow-release nitrogen in the material. If you are thinking of applying a commercial fertilizer, there are several things to consider. Be sure to check the OMRI lists to confirm the approved status of particular products. Follow the application directions and make sure that the rate and timing of application meet organic guidelines to avoid crop, soil, and water contamination. Check with your certifier if you are unsure about how or when you are permitted to apply a particular product. Some commercial organic fertilizers may have effects that are not so different from conventional fertilizers, including providing highly available soluble nutrients, which can be vulnerable to leaching and other losses, and may result in reduced soil pH. Your soils may sometimes benefit from additions of micronutrients or other amendments. Some micronutrients are not readily available in natural forms. In these cases, some synthetic products are allowed, but you will need documentation of a deficiency from a soil or plant tissue test. You should apply micronutrients at the rates recommended in your test results. And, as always, if you have doubts about whether the recommendations you have received are appropriate for organics, you should check in with your certifier before applying. There are a variety of ideas that you may hear promoted as magic bullets or keys to perfecting the health and fertility of your soils. Some frequently promoted ideas include the base cation saturation ratio, fungal to bacterial ratios, and a variety of inoculant products. In many cases, you may be urged to pay for products, workshops, or consulting services based on these ideas. These ideas are not necessarily completely invalid, but although the sales pitches can use very scientific-sounding language, the products and services sold are often not supported by published, peer-reviewed research. By the way, crop-appropriate strains of rhizobium inoculant are not in the magic bullet category, as they are well supported by research. Not all of the products and systems that you will see promoted are reputable. We urge you to use caution when paying for these products or services, and when in doubt, again, consult with extension specialists, your certifier, and experienced organic growers. If the claims made about a product seem too good to be true, they probably are.
We hope this module has helped you understand how to build healthy, fertile soils as you transition your farm to organic. Here are some key points to remember from Part 2 of our Soil series. Rotation is your main tool for managing soil health and fertility. Choose crops and inputs that fit the needs of your soil and your land. Choose permitted plant and animal-based fertility sources, including green manures, animal manures, and composts. And whenever you are uncertain about an input or practice, check in with your certifier. Thank you for watching. This concludes our modules in the Soil series.
This project is supported by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, National Institute of Food and Agriculture, Organic Transitions Program under Award Number 2013-5, 1106-2-1005. This project is supported by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Agricultural Marketing Service, National Organic Program under the Transition to Organic Partnership Program, TOPP, in the Midwest region. Any opinions, findings, conclusions, or recommendations expressed in this publication are those of the authors and should not be construed to represent any official USDA or U.S. government determination or policy. The University of Minnesota shall provide equal access to and opportunity in its programs, facilities, and employment without regard to race, color, creed, religion, national origin, gender, age, marital status, familial status, disability, public assistance status, membership or activity in a local commission created for the purpose of dealing with discrimination, veteran status, sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression. For more information about this project, please see organicag.umn.edu, copyright 2026, Regents of the University of Minnesota. All rights reserved.